Hello, class, and welcome back to our lecture on leadership and rhetoric. And in this rhetorical analysis lecture, we have already, in the first part of this lecture, explored a little bit of fundraising rhetoric and some examples from the Terry Fox Foundation. And now we're going to move on to public speech rhetoric, and probably one of the most famous speeches in the English-speaking world. So in addition to fundraising rhetoric, another important aspect, an example of rhetoric in the social and community service context is public speech rhetoric. Public speeches are often used by community leaders and politicians and advocates and activists to push for policy changes and push society towards social justice. So what I want to do next is explore in detail a public speech and analyze the rhetoric used to convey a message. And one powerful example of public speech rhetoric is the famous "I Have a Dream" speech by Dr. Martin Luther King back in 1963 during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And this speech is widely regarded as one of the most iconic and influential speeches in American history. And its message of racial equality and justice still resonates today. Dr. King's speech begins with a reference to the Emancipation Proclamation and the promise of freedom for all. But he quickly points out that this promise has not been fulfilled for African Americans. He then uses vivid and powerful metaphors to describe the ongoing struggle for equality, stating that African Americans are still not free, and that they are crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. Throughout the speech, Dr. King uses rhetorical devices such as repetition, parallelism, and allusion to reinforce his message and evoke emotions in his audience. And he repeats the phrase, "I have a dream," several times throughout the speech, using it as a refrain to emphasize his vision of the future, in which racial equality is a true reality. And he also uses parallel structure to draw comparisons between different aspects of the struggle for justice, such as the mountains and valleys that must be crossed and the chains that must be broken. And Dr. King's use of rhetorical devices and powerful imagery helped to inspire and mobilize the civil rights movement. And his message of justice and equality continues to inspire people today. His speech is a powerful example of the importance of rhetoric in the social and community service context, and of the ways in which effective rhetoric can be used to promote positive change. Now, I want to highlight here that research has shown that effective rhetoric in public speeches can have a significant impact on audience attitudes and behaviors. For example, a study by Mastro and Greenberg from 2000 found that the use of vivid and emotional language in political speeches can increase audience engagement and persuade them to take action. Similarly, a study by Hogg and Vaughn in 2008 found that the use of rhetorical devices such as repetition and metaphors can increase audience persuasion and motivation. Now, in this phase of the lecture, we're going to go on and also look at a third example of rhetoric in the social and community service context, And this example concerns the rhetoric used by a social worker in a client meeting aimed at motivating behavioral change. So, in this context, again, we have the goal of engaging a person for change, but instead of it being massive amounts of people, it's one-on-one. But the strategies are still the same. There's some key strategies that you should be mindful of when it comes to rhetoric. And these are pathos, ethos, and logos. You don't necessarily need to remember those, but they can be useful concepts. These are three different rhetorical strategies used in communication to appeal to the audience's emotions, their credibility, and logic, respectively. So I want to kind of highlight them here. Pathos is an emotional appeal that aims to evoke strong feelings, such as pity, or anger, or happiness in an audience. It involves using language that is emotionally charged, such as vivid descriptions, or storytelling, or figurative language, to create a strong emotional response. Pathos is commonly used in advertising, in political speeches, and social movements. Then there's ethos, and this is a credibility appeal that aims to establish the speaker or the writer's trustworthiness and their authority in the eyes of the audience. And this involves using language that demonstrates the speaker or writer's expertise or experience or character. For example, a doctor may use their medical credentials to establish their credibility when speaking about a health issue. Ethos is commonly used in academic writing, business communication, and public speaking. And logos. Logos is a logical appeal that aims to persuade the audience by using reasoning and evidence to support a claim or argument. It involves using language that is clear and rational and structured, such as statistics, and facts, and logical arguments. A logos is commonly used in academic writing, scientific research, and legal argumentation. In general, effective communication involves a balance of all three rhetorical strategies to engage and persuade your audience. The role of social workers in promoting behavior change is crucial. And one of the primary ways that social workers achieve this is through the use of rhetoric. And rhetoric refers here to the use of language and persuasive techniques to influence or change someone's attitudes or behavior. So let's consider an example of a social worker using rhetoric in a client meeting. Suppose a social worker is working with a client who is struggling with addiction and has been hesitant to make changes in their lifestyle. In this scenario, the social worker would need to use rhetoric to motivate the client to take action and make the necessary changes. The social worker might use various rhetorical strategies such as pathos and ethos and logos to convince the client to change their behavior. For instance, the social worker could use pathos to appeal to the client's emotions by sharing stories of people who have overcome addiction and the benefits of a sober lifestyle. The social worker could also use ethos to establish credibility by sharing their own experiences or credentials in the field of addiction. And furthermore, the social worker could use logos to appeal to the client's logic by providing statistics and research-based evidence about the dangers of addiction and the benefits of sobriety. And the social worker could also work with the client to develop a plan that includes specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals. In other words, what's known in business and leadership as SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. SMART goals to motivate the client to change. So the use of rhetoric by social workers, by community service workers can have a significant impact on clients' motivation and behavior change. And several studies have shown that social workers who use rhetoric effectively can improve clients' outcomes. For example, a study by Barrett et al. In 2018 found that social workers who used a technique known as motivational interviewing, a type of rhetoric aimed at promoting behavioral change, were more effective in helping clients quit smoking. So in essence, the use of rhetoric by social workers, by community service workers, is crucial, not only in fundraising and in changing public policy, but also in working one-on-one with individual clients to help them to maximize their own life strengths. So in this lecture, we've explored the concept of rhetoric and its significance in the social and community service sector. We've examined 3 different examples of rhetoric in action, including fundraising rhetoric, public speech rhetoric, and client meeting rhetoric. And we've analyzed the lessons learned from each one. We began by defining rhetoric as the art of effective communication, specifically the use of language to persuade or influence someone. We discussed how rhetoric analysis is a tool used to examine language and the strategies used to communicate. We then examined the fundraising rhetoric of the Terry Fox Foundation and analyzed the strategies of pathos, ethos, and logos used to appeal to donors and raise funds for cancer research. We learned that effective fundraising rhetoric is grounded in a clear message that aligns with the values of the audience and creates an emotional connection. We also looked at public speech by a community leader advocating for policy change. We analyzed the strategies of pathos, ethos, and logos used to make a compelling argument in the case of Dr. King's speech, and how to convince an audience of the need for change. We learned that effective speech rhetoric involves a clear and compelling message delivered with passion and authenticity. And that's something that certainly shines through with Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. And finally, we examined rhetoric used in that one-on-one setting between a social service worker and a client meeting, using motivational interviewing. And we analyze the strategies of pathos, ethos, and logos used to build rapport, to establish credibility, and inspire the client to take action. And overall, I think what we've learned in this lecture is that rhetoric is a powerful tool for communication in the social and community service sector, and that a strong understanding of rhetorical strategies can help professionals to better connect with their audience and achieve their goals. So, we're going to end our lecture there. I hope you enjoyed it and found it very informative, and I will see you as we go on with our next lesson next week. You take care. Goodbye.